Welcome to China Case Podcast. In today's episode, we'll uncover the terrifying journey of Fan Tac, a criminal whose name has become synonymous with fear. Over 4 years, his reign of terror spanned provinces, leaving bloodshed and destruction in his wake. From violent massacres in karaoke lounges to cold-blooded killings, his story is one of unrelenting violence. This is the tale of China's cold-blooded killer, a manhunt that mobilized hundreds of officers and captivated a nation. Join us as we delve into this chilling case. The winter of 1992 in northern China brought harsh snow and frost, but Hainan in the south remained warm and lively. In the bustling Chengmai district, a karaoke lounge, Dai for Hao, was alive with laughter and music. The lounge, owned by Shimu, a crime boss expanding his illicit empire, was a hotspot for nightlife. But behind the lights and music, a deadly rivalry brewed. Shimu's growing influence clashed with Lingmu, another crime boss seeking control over the same territory. Desperate to eliminate his rival, Lin hired the infamous Fan Tac, known as Hainan's most feared assassin. At 37, Fan Tac had already carved out a reputation for his merciless efficiency. His victims spent numerous crimes, earning him the chilling nickname, Cold-Blooded Killer. Fan Tac's journey into infamy began years earlier as a street thug. His brutal tactics and cold demeanor quickly elevated him within the underworld. By the late 1980s, he had masterminded a series of violent robberies, including one where his gang looted over 100,000 yuan from a store. His fearlessness and lack of remorse made him the perfect weapon in Lin Mu's arsenal. On December 16, 1992, Fan Tac's reputation would reach new heights or depths. At 10:40 p.m., he arrived at Dai Fu Hao in a black crown sedan, flanked by 4 armed accomplices. Their mission was clear: eliminate Shimu and anyone in their way. Fan Tac and his men stormed the karaoke lounge, each armed to the teeth. Fan carried an AK-47, a weapon rarely seen in civilian hands at the time. Without hesitation, he burst into the VIP room where Shimu's gang had gathered. Chaos erupted as Fan unleashed a hail of bullets. The piercing sound of gunfire drowned out screams, and the room was transformed into a slaughterhouse. Blood splattered walls and floors as Fan's accomplices joined the assault, indiscriminately shooting at anyone in sight. Women who had been serving drinks moments earlier were now targets, their desperate cries silenced by the relentless gunfire. The carnage was indiscriminate. Bystanders, staff, and gang members all fell victim. When the gunfire ceased, over 20 bodies lay lifeless, including several innocent civilians. But the intended target, Shimu, had left the lounge earlier that evening, escaping what could have been his death. Enraged by this failure, Fan turned his fury toward the remaining survivors, ensuring none could leave to recount the horror. This massacre would forever mark the beginning of Fan Tac's reign of terror. The massacre at Dai Fu Hao was a gruesome introduction to Fan Tac's unchecked brutality, but it was far from the peak of his criminal spree. Over the next 2 years, his activities escalated dramatically, weaving a trail of violence that spanned multiple provinces. Kidnappings, armed robberies, and cold-blooded murders became his trademarks, each crime bolder and more horrifying than the last. By 1994, Fan Tac's notoriety reached its zenith when he orchestrated a string of kidnappings that ended with 3 dead, 1 gravely injured, and over 100,000 yuan in stolen cash and goods. Fan Tac's disregard for human life was not just a byproduct of his profession, it was a central part of his character. Witness testimonies painted a picture of a man who executed his plans with surgical precision, often silencing witnesses with lethal force to ensure his freedom. Realizing the growing intensity of the manhunt, Fan took a drastic step to elude capture. He underwent plastic surgery, completely altering his facial features. This transformation was more than physical, it became a psychological weapon, allowing him to navigate cities and public spaces without fear of recognition. With a new identity, Fan resumed his life of crime, confident that he was untouchable. In Guangzhou, Fan found refuge in the most unlikely of places, a modest hair salon owned by Wu Mu, a young woman trying to make ends meet. The salon became his sanctuary and, eventually, a hub for his operations. Wu, charmed or coerced, became an unwitting accomplice. Fan's gang used the salon as a meeting point, plotting their next moves while blending into the bustling urban landscape. However, Fan's violent tendencies made it impossible for him to maintain a low profile. A dispute with a local gang spiraled out of control, culminating in a brutal shootout. Fan, armed with a handgun, killed 6 gang members in broad daylight. The boldness of the act shocked the nation and brought renewed attention to his crimes. The brazen murder spree in Guangzhou heightened public outrage and marked a turning point in the manhunt for the Ministry of Public Security. Capturing Fan was no longer just a matter of justice, it was a necessity to restore public faith in law enforcement. By 1995, Fan Tac's name was synonymous with fear and violence. The Ministry of Public Security classified him as China's most wanted criminal, placing him at the top of their priority list. His face, both PI and post-surgery, adorned wanted posters across the nation. Public broadcasts, newspapers, and local bulletins carried his image and descriptions, urging citizens to report any sightings. The scale of the manhunt was unprecedented. Over 300 officers from various provinces were assigned to the case, forming a task force that coordinated resources, intelligence, and manpower on a national level. From bustling urban centers to remote villages, checkpoints were established, and surveillance intensified. Yet, Fan remained elusive. Fan's cunning adaptability was his greatest strength. He knew the limits of law enforcement and exploited them at every turn. He frequently changed his hideouts, using aliases and bribes to slip through checkpoints. His ability to disappear just as the police closed him became a source of frustration for the task force and a chilling testament to his resourcefulness. The breakthrough came in July 1996, nearly 4 years after the Daifahao massacre. Ling Jiaohan, one of Fan's closest allies, was intercepted at an airport carrying a large sum of cash. The money was intended for Fan, a payment for one of his recent jobs. Under relentless interrogation, Lin finally revealed the fugitive's location, a secluded village near Chongqing. This revelation electrified the task force. For the first time, they had a concrete lead on Fan's whereabouts. Plans were set in motion to launch a high-stakes operation to bring him to justice. November 27, 1996, dawned quietly in a remote village near Chongqing. The surrounding hills and sparse population made it an ideal hiding place for Fan Tac. Here, he had rented a modest home, shielded from prying eyes by distance and secrecy. Unbeknownst to him, the task force had been monitoring the area for days. Drawing on Lin's information, they devised a plan to capture Fan without sparking a violent confrontation. They knew that any attempt to storm his hideout could lead to casualties, especially given his history of armed resistance. Fan had a known weakness: gambling. The officers decided to exploit this by creating a scenario he couldn't resist. They enlisted the help of a local resident, a man who had previously interacted with Fan and earned his trust. The plan was simple but risky: invite Fan to a card game under the pretense of a casual gathering. Around PM, the bait was set. The local resident called out, "Hey, come join us for a few rounds." Fan, dressed casually in house clothes, emerged from his home, visibly relaxed. He sauntered toward the makeshift card table, completely unaware that he was walking into a trap. As he sat down, officers hidden nearby closed in. The element of surprise was critical. Fan realized too late what was happening. He lunged for his waist, likely reaching for a concealed weapon, but the officers moved faster. Within seconds, they tackled him to the ground, pinning him down as he thrashed and yelled. A search of his hideout revealed a loaded handgun under his bed, its safety off and ready to fire. The officers knew how close they had come to a deadly standoff. The precision and patience of their operation had averted bloodshed, delivering Fan into custody without a single shot fired. The capture of Fan Tac marked the culmination of a 4-year pursuit that tested the resolve and ingenuity of Chinese law enforcement. It was a moment of triumph, not just for the officers involved, but for a nation haunted by his crimes. Fan Tac was transported to Hainan, where he faced trial for his numerous crimes. The courtroom became a theater of justice as survivors and families of victims recounted the horrors he had inflicted. Fan's stoic demeanor during the trial only added to the public's outrage. Yet, as the evidence mounted and the weight of his actions became undeniable, his composure began to crack. Ultimately, he was sentenced to death, bringing closure to a nation haunted by his crimes. Fan Tac's story is a testament to the relentless pursuit of justice. His capture marked the end of a dark chapter in Chinese history, but serves as a reminder of the devastation caused by unchecked violence. Thank you for joining us on China Case Podcast. Stay tuned for more in-depth explorations of cases that reveal the darkest corners of humanity. Until next time, stay safe. VNBN MCNH